Okay, welcome everyone. We want to talk about lean flow and learning from the experts today.
My name's John Miller. Hi, everybody. I spent formative years in product development, spent a lot of time in ultra-large scale system, developing all sorts of things, spent time as a system engineer, software developer, tester, went through the project management, program management route. I've been involved with Scaled Agile for about 8 years now, and I've been in SPCT for about 5 years.
Thanks, John. I'll introduce myself now. So Dwayne Stroman, also an SPCT. I've had the fortune of working in lean supply chain in manufacturing for a number of years. And what I learned there was how lean flow truly operates. But as I worked in these industries, I was part of the software industry. I was building applications for supply chain components. I was building manufacturing shop floor systems and so on. One of the things I came to recognize very quickly is in software engineering, we're quite a ways behind lean manufacturing in their flow and lean supply chain in their flow approach. And so that's what John and I wanted to talk about during this webinar. So let me introduce, here's our update, here's our concern. We are having technical difficulties. If you just joined, we've discovered that we're not able to play back the audio from a number of video clips, and I'll present to you what we have so you see the challenge. We have some clips from some friends of mine that are in the supply chain industry, and we're giving a number of just golden nuggets about ways to think about lean flow, how to find it, how to incorporate it, how to make it part of your culture, especially in a product development environment. We didn't want to present the webinar and you not able to hear the clips correctly. So what we're going to do is go partway into the webinar because there is some information we want to share with you. And there is a survey. We need your input to make this webinar more successful. So the survey is going to ask you about lean flow, and we're going to incorporate that into the recording we create. So let's jump right in. So our survey is about flow efficiency. We have a poll, and what we'd like you to do is in the chat window, just type in a number, 0 to 100% of what you think your flow efficiency is. Now, as you're thinking through that, let me give you an explanation. We term flow efficiency, you see the quote from Zolta Fabok, 100% flow efficiency means the work item is never idle. In other words, from a software engineering product development perspective, as we're developing a solution, at no point is it sitting at rest. There is always value being added, further definition, further capabilities, new features added to it, whatever it might be, it's always moving forward. That's 100%. So we want to ask you, what do you think your flow efficiency is for your organization? Go ahead and post that into the chat window.
And Dwayne?
Yes, John.
If they were doing some things with respect to SAFe or DevOps, where would they look in their organization to find their real number after today?
Yes, good question. So we'll let you go ahead and put that in the chat window. And as you do, let's talk about some of the things we've learned, John and I have learned over the years about flow impediments, some of the flow problems. John, you and I talked about these feature definition delays, 20% hit. The budget allocation we've seen, 35% hit. In fact, I think you've said that in many cases, you've seen more than that.
Just for all that project portfolio management up front. Yep, absolutely.
Yes. Technical debt slowing us down, test cycle delays. I know you've shared a number of stories in the past about things that should take hours or days are taking weeks and months, and we've seen that all the time. So we talk about flow efficiency. John, you've worked a lot in the defense industry and a number of industries that needed to focus on flow efficiency. How would you define flow efficiency?
From the aspect of what you were just saying, Dwayne, so all of the things, while I was working in defense, one of the things that we did is we created these Microsoft project files, people call them schedules, and everything was linked. And everybody thought that we would create these perfect estimates and everybody would perfectly execute, and then we'd come up with perfect flow efficiency. In reality, it never quite worked like that. There were all the delays that you had on the prior page, and consequently, there were always these handoffs that would never occur exactly when they were supposed to. And when they did occur, then they wouldn't have the content that was required. So everything was delayed. And so what happened was, over time, those delays added up to extend any given schedule by about average of 65%.
Yeah. A number of key delays that hit us that affect, again, what we call flow efficiency. And think of that just as value enters the pipeline to when it exits, meaning we've got a new idea all the way to we've delivered on the idea. Not only delivered on it, we've measured the impact of it, the effectiveness, and brought that back in for rinse and repeat on the next idea. 100% flow efficiency is what we're focused on from a manufacturing supply chain perspective. Unfortunately, in product development, we often don't cover that. We often don't work through that. Now, we're getting a few numbers into the chat window, unfortunately private. What we see quite often is numbers anywhere from, let's move forward to this, 45%. Sometimes we see 60% numbers. Sometimes we see as high as 75%. Here's the problem. This is the reality. In the research we've done, the work we've done over the years, it's more like 15%. And that's actually a high number. John, you were talking about how you found some data, some evidence that actually means that number is lower than 15%.
So when we do value stream, when we actually understand a development value stream and then back in all the numbers, and a lot of folks use the phrase value stream mapping for that, when we start getting real numbers from real organizations. I was working with one group, large financial organization, and their numbers were drastically less than 15%. As a matter of fact, to the senior managers there, they were quite scary.
Yeah. John, let's talk about an example. So one of my friends is from Amazon. So we're going to be talking about a lot of Amazon examples. You brought up this data about how Amazon has improved their flow efficiency from a package delivery perspective.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I actually was doing some research on Amazon. I just really as part of this, and I was looking for something totally different. And I found these numbers that, back in when they first started, what they were proposing was to replace, and everybody on the phone is probably familiar with this. Back when we called in 800 numbers to make an order, we would call an 800 number, order what we wanted from a catalog or anything else, and then we would wait 3 to 4 weeks to get it, and wait, and sometimes make more phone calls. Amazon jumps in and immediately they started looking at what it took. And right off the bat, when they first started, because they did not have their RDCs, it took typically about 3 weeks to get a product that we ordered, a book. And then all of a sudden, there's some serious drops through time. That one of the pieces of data that I found was in 2015, it was just under 6 days, 2018 down to about 3. And then as we were talking about that day, I ordered a book or something. And on May 12th, it took about 9 hours from when I ordered something to when it got to my door. I ordered it about noon and it got there before 9 p.m. When you take a look at that, those kinds of efficiency numbers and those kinds of calculations just here, and it obviously depends on where you start and where you end up. But if you just take those numbers that we have on the screen, there's over a 95% decrease in time. And for anybody, that's incredible. And that gets into that activity ratio. So now when we order something, as an example from Amazon, we order it, it starts moving right away till the point it gets to our door. Very different than 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I did some rough calculations in 94. The flow efficiency then was what, around 5 to 7%, something like that?
At best.
Yeah. And
when you took in all those delays.
And that's even before improving the actual actions that happen. So if you go back to flow efficiency definition, that value is sitting idle for quite a period of time, sitting on a truck, sitting on a conveyor belt, not moving forward. So if we take that 15% number and we say, wow, what can we do with that? Things can be done. Here's an example. Working with a large retail organization in the United States. We did some value stream mapping, discovered areas where it was taking up to 52 weeks to deliver some infrastructure capabilities. 52 weeks. In retail, you can't afford that. Through flow efficiency, flow optimization, we were able to cut that down to 4 hours. Now, those kind of numbers might seem ridiculous. Let's look at another example. We had another situation with a marketing group, and they said their typical marketing cycle was 26 weeks. So my question to them was, okay, for holiday season of this year, you have to start in June and July? Yes, that's what they said. We worked through it. They had a crisis situation where they had to really eliminate all the extra waste and simply focus on what needed to be done. 2 weeks. They were able to deliver the same campaign, actually higher quality, in 2 weeks. We just had a client we were talking to that said they were building a new product and using flow techniques, using scaled agile framework approaches, they were able to reduce what would typically have been a 2+ year engineering cycle to less than 6 months. In fact, he said it actually was close to 3 months, but not quite. So within 2 PIs, or planning increments, they were able to deliver a newly engineered product of very high quality that typically would have cost them more than 2 years to complete. That's the type of numbers we're talking about, differences we can have. But here's the problem. The reality, product development, as I mentioned before, is drastically behind. John, you mentioned this, that anyone really not thinking and practicing lean are going to be struggling with that same problem, correct?
And we see that every day. And by the way, for everybody on the phone, I'm constantly into publications like Barron's and Wall Street Journals just to see what's going on in the real world. And every day we can all see in real life the companies that are bounding forward, the companies that are at the forefront of digital awareness and digital production and digital delivery, and how the companies that are what some people would just call legacy companies or old school, whatever you want to call it, there are leaps and bounds difference. And there are a lot of companies that the fear is they don't really start moving forward, they will never be able to catch up.
Yeah, that's the problem. Let's learn some lessons from the experts in supply chain. And again, this is where we're going to abbreviate the webinar and record the rest of it, because let me set the situation here. As I said, I'm fortunate enough to have several friends that are deep into the supply chain industry. One friend has worked for UPS for 30+ years. Another friend works for Amazon, has been with them and in retail supply chain for over 30 years. Another friend has been in the reverse logistics pattern for 26 years. Fourth friend worked within supply chain reverse logistics, moved over to product development, and so really can compare and contrast between the two. The interviews is what we're not going to be able to watch, but setting the context for it, these friends all came over to my house for a barbecue, very informal setting, conversation. What was fascinating is I gave a quick example for them. Some friends of mine were sitting around my desk right here, and I picked up an object on my desk, and I said, this is how product development works, because they were trying to understand why we needed to talk about lean flow. And I picked up an object from my desk and said, well, imagine this is a piece of value from a software perspective, a product development perspective. So I pick it up and I add the value to it, and then I hand it to my friend Dan. Only Dan is working on something else. And so I set it down. And now 2 weeks later, Dan is able to pick it up and he starts working on it. It's okay, he can move it forward, and he hands it to Rob. But Rob is also working on something else. So eventually Rob picks it up, and when he sees it, he starts to work on it, realizes what I did in the first place wasn't accurate. Maybe it wasn't complete, whatever it might be, hands it back to me. The look on Mike and Shane's faces, who aren't from product development, was, I'll be honest, it was a look of horror. They were looking at me like, well, why would you do it that way? And so they went and sat down in the little studio we had set up and started to talk, and we were setting up the video equipment and so forth. And I had to pause them a second to say, wait, hold on, this is all too good, because they just naturally started talking about lean flow. And what was fascinating was I learned a clear lesson that Toyota has taught us as well. In Toyota, John, you've mentioned this, they don't all understand. They don't know what a value stream map is. They talk about flow of materials and information. A lot of the terms we talk about, they don't even understand because it's intuitive, it's cultural, it's built into what they do. These gentlemen were exemplifying the same thing. It's built into what they do. Fascinating conversation. John, you heard a lot of the recordings. Anything you would like to add to that?
From all of them. And by the way, everybody, there's about, we actually distilled about an hour and 30 minutes of recording down into, less than an hour-long webinar. And one of the things I found really interesting was, as we try to get lean flow in product development, we are thinking through problems that other industries, logistics, thought through a long time ago and started solving. And it was really amazing. They are using exactly the same words in the same ways, but they're talking about a totally different flow of value. But we're using exactly the same concepts. And I think that's a critical thing for everybody to realize is there's another industry that is doing exactly this, and the lessons apply perfectly.
Yeah. That being said, again, unfortunately, we just don't feel that we can properly convey the message and the lessons. We have a series of lessons learned from the supply chain industry, from these interviews, but the interviews themselves really present the lesson, and John and I are simply adding to it. So what we'd like to do is thank you very much for attending. In the follow-up email from Knowledgehut, we will send you a link to the full recording that will have the 4K video, full clear audio, so you can listen to it, watch it in much better quality. We're just concerned that you would not be able to hear the audio properly in this webinar format. By the way, we are switching platforms, so hopefully that will help in the future. But we do want to thank you very much for attending. Watch for that video, and we hope you can share it within your organization. And start to gain some excitement, some energy, some ideas around creating flow efficiency within your organization. With that being said, I want to thank all of you for joining so far. We apologize greatly for the technical issues. Hopefully the video will make up for that. If you do have any questions around, once you've watched the video around flow efficiency, please feel free. We will put our contact information in there. Please email us directly. We would love to help out, answer your questions, discuss more of this, because as you probably can tell, John and I are both very passionate about lean flow. We come from that background. We know the value that can be brought to product development. It's just a matter of opening people's eyes to what the opportunities are. John, any parting thoughts?
Oh, all sorts, but as we go through the slides, they'll all be coming from the slides. So going forward, I'd hate to ruin the Easter eggs that'll come tomorrow.
Yes, exactly. All right, with that, thank you everyone. And again, look for that recording. It should be coming fairly soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, John, and thanks, Dwayne. All the attendees, thank you so much for joining for today's session. As mentioned, yeah, there will be a recording of this that'll be available, and we'll share that with you really, really soon. So once again, wherever you joined us from, I hope you have a good day and a good evening. Thank you once again.